Loudness was formed in 1981 in Osaka, Japan by a couple guys who'd spent the previous few years playing in a fairly successful pop band called Lazy. And before we get to Loudness, we have to talk about Lazy because they're kind of fascinating. Despite taking their name from a Deep Purple song and wanting to play heavier music, Lazy got pushed into a poppier direction by managers and producers.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. 悲しい顔はよせよちょっと笑っておくれ
They put out 5 albums between 1978 and 1980, which overall have a very 70s sound that ranges from bubblegummy boy band pop to general light rock and even some disco elements. It's actually pretty fun for what it is, but it also doesn't hurt that the guitar playing is already fantastic. But through all of it, you can literally feel a hard rock band trying to come out, like on their second album, Dream a Dream, with this album cover, when they suddenly throw out Full Count. It's like you're sitting there listening to a peppy light rock album, and then out of nowhere, there's a Van Halen solo. But by their 5th album, Spaceship Earth, Lazy had dropped the pop side almost entirely in exchange for a mix of prog rock and Judas Priest-style aggression. The guys were clearly ready for something different, and in the early months of 1981, Lazy would break up. Guitarist Akira Takasaki, drummer Munetaka Higuchi, and bassist Hiroyuki Tanaka formed Loudness, although Hiroyuki would leave to work on anime soundtracks and be replaced by Masayoshi Yamashita. With vocalist Minoru Nihara on board, they formed a band where they could play the kind of music they wanted to play.
大きい音とか、ケバケバしいとか。ということでやっぱり音はやっぱ大きい。大きいです。めちゃめちゃ大きい。そうです。一番大きいです。
Loudness would release their first album, The Birthday Eve, in November of 1981. This album goes full-on heavy rock, with catchy as hell riffs and the energy of British heavy metal. Plus, free from the restrictions of Lazy, we start to get some truly epic Akira Takasaki solos. Selected through an audition process, Minoru is just the right amount of over-the-top, and his voice goes perfectly with Akira's sweeping guitar. Once again, there's a strong Judas Priest vibe, but also just a Western rock influence in general. was little to no media support for heavy music in Japan at the time, so there was no single off the birthday eve. But the album and live Loudness concerts did so well, the band released Burning Love as a single in May of 1982. The second album from Loudness, Devil Soldier, would come out just a couple months later. Apparently that baby from the cover of the first album has been born, leaving his crystallized womb thing cracked open and empty. He could be anywhere by now. But he's actually only made it as far as the back cover, where he's seen wielding a halberd-type weapon and riding a jaguar. I'm not entirely sure what he's up to, but that is one tough-looking little baby. This album is along the same lines as the first, with a combination of tight, groovy riffs, screamy metal vocals, thick bass, and amazing solos. And that energy carried over to their sold-out live shows, which helped the band grow a massive following across Japan. Loudness would release their third album, The Law of Devil's Land, in early 1983. Not only does Loudness continue their inventive take on Western rock here, but there's also a flashiness to it that takes this one up another level for me. With those insane riffs and Akira's optimistic solos, it feels like a blend of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, with touches of Van Halen, Queen, and Yngwie Malmsteen. The Devil Baby has grown up a bit, and now he's sitting on a throne with a sword. I guess that seems pretty harmless. Oh, geez. Well, that doesn't look good. Anyway, like previous albums, the singles wouldn't actually be on the album. One single was released at the same time, with Geraldine on the A-side. They'd release another single towards the end of the year, with Road Racer on the A-side. This one has a galloping Iron Maiden-y feel. And is it just me, or is any metal song about racing always awesome? After the release of The Law of Devil's Land, Loudness would embark on their first international tour, going through the United States and then Europe. They'd end up staying in Europe to record their fourth album, Disillusion. The songwriting continues to grow in complexity here, even though the main riffs remain simple and hooky. The whole album is really an excellent blend of hard rock styles, from thrash and gut punch hard rock tracks to the rainbow-esque single Milky Way. And another highlight on the album is Akira's own Eruption-inspired solo titled Exploder. With growing attention from the States, Loudness would re-record the vocals for an English version of Disillusion to appeal more to Western audiences, which seems kinda weird since a lot of the lyrics on the original version were in English anyway. But aside from the vocals, the only major difference between the two is the opening track included on the English version, a sort of classically themed instrumental. Loudness would sign with Atco Records, a subsidiary of Atlantic, to release Thunder in the East in 1985. Produced by Max Norman, this album was a full attack on the Western market.
Nowadays, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but in those days, you know, trying to break into America, which was the whole point, you know, that was really kind of a struggle. Mickey spoke the best English out of all of them, being a singer, but even his English was not very good, and so it was kind of difficult.
But despite any language barrier concerns, the album was a success, largely due to the single Crazy Nights, which was showcased on MTV.
I remember asking them, you know, more than one occasion, you know, what does it mean? MZA, I love it. MZA. They were like, it doesn't mean anything, just sounds good.
This album is so good. Every track really stands out, and again, there's just a nice mix, like the power ballad We Could Be Together. The video sees a girl in the audience awkwardly flirting with Minoru, so he awkwardly flirts back. There was a VHS release at the same time, so technically every song on the album has a video, which are mostly made up of footage from the same performance. However, there are a couple of themes, like a woman we see climbing stairs between each video. Eventually she makes it to the roof, where Loudness is playing Clockwork Toy.
Don't do this, don't do that, don't look back, you monster.
I freaking love the bridge on this track. It's easily one of my favorite parts on the album.
Don't try to tell me your fantasy. It's my life. You try to tell me what's right for me. Turn the knife, twist the key.
There's also a track that sounds like it came straight off a Manowar album. The video for Heavy Chains has the woman back to her old tricks climbing stairs again. She makes it up to a terrifying room where some creepy mannequin versions of the band are just hanging out. She moves to a gated area and closes the door, which is probably a good idea because the mannequins suddenly come to life.
Just like a knife into her heart, keeping her down.
As the mannequins are walking off, all of a sudden they mysteriously disappear. Then, perhaps even more mysteriously, they reappear just a couple seconds later. In No Way Out, things get really weird. The woman can somehow control the mannequins, and she leads them into an operating room. She starts to cut one of them open, while the others just sit there waiting. And if that wasn't disturbing enough, the mannequins have nipples. Finally, just to add a little extra fuel to my nightmares, she hosts a dinner party for the mannequins in the closing track, Never Change Your Mind. With nothing resolved or explained, she gets up and walks off to awesome, triumphant music she's done nothing to earn. After an initial release in Japan under the title Shadows of War, Loudness would release their 6th album in the States as Lightning Strikes, with a different track order. The US version starts off with the very LA-sounding single, Let It Go. The video is mostly the band playing, but it's also part documentary about how Akira's guitar is made. Apparently this guitar has magical powers though, because it suddenly flies off and teleports the band back to Japan for a very special cameo. Lightning Strikes doesn't hit quite as hard as Thunder in the East for me, but it does have some standout tracks, like Ashes in the Sky, previously titled Shadows of War on the Japanese version of the album.
By Deep Purple, and this guitar player Akira, he's influenced by Rich Blackmore a lot.
Lightning Strikes is good, but I personally enjoy their 7th album, Hurricane Eyes, a lot more. This one would get an English release first, followed by a Japanese version a few months later. It goes into even more of a glam direction, but it totally works for me. The single, This Lonely Heart, for example, is pretty good. It got a video with the band rocking out in a desert wasteland. There are also some ladies wandering around, and I can only assume they're lost in the desert looking for the concert. Yes, they're dressed like it's the post-apocalypse, but that's also just how people dressed in the 80s. Overall, this one is really solid, with several awesome tracks. In My Dreams in particular stood out for me. The album closer, So Lonely, is a reworking of the album closer from Disillusion, Aries' Lament, and it's just as awesome here as it was before. As the brief success Loudness had in America seemed to be fading, they'd release a Japanese-only EP titled Jealousy to try and reconnect with their Japanese fans who they felt they'd been neglecting. But the Western market was still apparently a priority, and following the release of the Jealousy EP, the decision would be made to replace Minoru with Mike Viscera, an American singer previously of the band Obsession.
As I recall, people were thinking he wasn't getting any better with his English. You know, obviously everything's a lot more, you know, cosmopolitan these days, but in those days, you know, it was quite a big deal.
The first of two Loudness albums with Michael would be Soldier of Fortune. It's got some really great tracks on it, but by replacing Minoru, Loudness would lose one of the major components that made them unique. The single, You Shook Me, got a video shot at Bronson Canyon in Los Angeles.
Tonight's the night, I'm breaking out. I've got to know what it's all about. Hey babe, there ain't no way I'm gonna lose you.
They rock so hard that it causes an avalanche and destroys the Hollywood sign. Somewhat ironically, Soldier of Fortune would do really well in Japan, but not even chart in the US. Still, Loudness would find themselves suddenly needing money.
The management had been abusing their power for quite some time, and we found out that we were broke.
So they decided to release an album with Michael singing old Loudness songs in Japan only, where they were basically guaranteed a hit record.
We'll cover some of the old Loudness stuff and have English lyrics, but we'll release it in Japan. And anything in Japan we would release would be gold and platinum within a couple days.
But the record label would have other plans, and in early 1991, On the Prowl would be released internationally, with only 3 previously unreleased tracks, including Down and Dirty. The rest would be either rearrangements of previously released material or straight covers, like In the Mirror. This is one of my favorite tracks from those early Loudness albums, and personally, even though Michael is a great singer, I'd rather just listen to those original versions.
That's why On the Prowl's a little odd, because it originally wasn't supposed to be for the world. It was only for Japan. You know, they let us do a couple new songs, but it was just a bad idea.
Even though On the Prowl went to number 7 in Japan, frustration within the band was growing, both with the music industry in general and direction for the band within a changing musical landscape.
Akira was really getting into the super heavy stuff at that point. He was almost getting to where he didn't want to play leads anymore. He wanted to sort of go into the heavy, grungy kind of thing, and you could kind of see that in Slap in the Face. That was the last thing we did together in the studio, and it was a single, again, you know, for Japan, get it out, make some money, promote it. Cool song, heavy, but that was the direction it was heading in, and even heavier. It was almost getting a little bit too dark. It wasn't my thing, but, you know, it was cool.
As Michael Viscera went on to record one of my favorite Yngwie Malmsteen albums, The Seventh Sign, Loudness would recruit former EZO singer Masaki Yamada. Bassist Masayoshi would also leave, and former ex-Japan bassist Taiji Sawada would join Loudness to record their self-titled 10th album. If you're gonna check out the heavier material from Loudness, this is definitely the album to go with. I will admit I'm not really a groove metal guy, but if you are, you'll probably like this one even more. Still, this album is super easy to listen to. It's got the kick-ass riffs and Akira Takasaki solos you want, mixed in with the more Anthrax or Pantera styling. It's probably worth noting that Black Widow is one of only 2 Loudness music videos from the 90s, so let's just enjoy it for a second. There are also a couple superior standout tracks on this one, like Hell Bites and, of course, Racing the Wind. Although the self-titled Loudness album seemed to be going in a good direction for 1992, and even reached number 2 in Japan, everyone would essentially quit the band. Akira would take a trip to India around this time and convert to Buddhism. He'd eventually return and talk Masaki into sticking around to record another album, along with former EZO drummer Hirotsugu Homa. Heavy metal hippies would kick off a series of borderline experimental albums for Loudness and Akira Takasaki. Akira, Masaki, and Hirotsugu would be joined by bassist Naoto Shibata, previously of Anthem, for the next 3 Loudness albums: Ghetto Machine from 1997, Dragon from 1998, and Engine from 1999. Known collectively as the Buddha rock period, these albums are just a big mix of 90s. Some tracks are groovy grunge, some are sludgy doom, some are basic alt-rock, and some are just a jam. I won't say these albums are devoid of good stuff, because I did find myself enjoying bits and pieces. But there is a rebellious streak running throughout these albums, which is illustrated best in their other 90s music video for the single Dog Shit. Yeah, Dog Shit. I have to say, it's got a cool Rage Against the Machine thing going, and I can't help but kinda like it. As 2001 approached, Masaki would actually suggest to Akira that he get the original lineup of Loudness back together for the 20th anniversary. So Munetaka, Masayoshi, Akira, and of course Minoru would get back together to release their 15th album, Spiritual Canoe. While it's great to have the original lineup back, and the music is more focused, the overall presentation would stay pretty heavy, with a mix of groovy thrash like The End of Earth, and sort of grungy alt-rock like the track How Many More Times. In fact, their next several albums are kind of hard to describe because while they have a similar feel overall, each one emphasizes a different aspect of their sound. Like Pandemonium, for example, which generally leans more alt-rock, or Biosphere, which goes into a more industrial-tinged nu metal direction, and Terror emphasizes a lot of doom and death metal elements. I am kind of oversimplifying these albums because there's just so many of them, but they're all really a mix of all those things. While the musicianship is still excellent and Akira's guitar playing is always amazing, this stretch of Loudness albums are still a bit too much on the nu metal side for my taste. While their 19th album, Racing, is not quite as awesome as I'd hoped based entirely on its title, it does feel like a step in the right direction, partially indicated by the return to their old logo. It still feels like a mix of a lot of different influences, maybe too many, and there is still a lot of aggressive, in-your-face energy. As well as more of the Pantera vibey groove-based stuff. And while that's not really my thing, Racing also has stuff like Live for the Moment. So there's a lot going on here. Loudness would release Breaking the Taboo in 2006 and Metal Mad in 2008, with essentially the same approach. In 2009's The Everlasting would be the last Loudness album with drummer and founding member Munetaka Higuchi, who would pass away just before they finished recording. The single, Hit the Rails, is okay, but the track after it, Flame of Rock, is full-on badass. Session drummer Masayuki Suzuki would fill in on one track, I Wonder. But Loudness liked working with him so much, they brought him on as Higuchi's full-time replacement. For his first full album with the band, King of Pain, they wanted to focus less on Akira's guitar work and more on Masayuki's awesome drumming. (2011's Eve to Dawn is more guitar-driven compared to King of Pain, and I think lays the groundwork for modern-day Loudness. There are still a ton of different influences, but Akira's gotten really good at blending them together. How long can we stand eternal domination, shining the eyes to the reality? One of my favorite examples of this from Eve to Dawn is Gonna Do It My Way, which starts off sounding like someone's UFC entrance music. That's right. And then goes into a catchy, almost poppy chorus. I just don't care, just the way I like it. I'm gonna do it my way. 2012 is another great entry along the same lines. Interestingly, in the video for Break New Ground, both Dreadlocks Akira and the new Blonde Akira make an appearance. But for me, as far as the current lineup of Loudness goes, their 26th album, The Sun Will Rise Again, is where it's at. It's still fairly similar to their other 21st century output, but this one has the most standout tracks for me and just some really cool parts. Plus, it ends with the excellent track Not Alone. Or doesn't, if you have the US version. It's meant to be, they're intertwined like chains of creation. So don't you be afraid, 'cause you're not alone. The most recent Loudness album, Rise to Glory from 2018, is pretty solid too. What's great about the current version of Loudness is that you both know what to expect and don't know what to expect. You know they have a ton of influences and styles to pull from, you know the musicianship is going to be top-notch, and you know there's going to be some interesting and intricate Akira Takasaki solos. But it always comes together with creative twists, and you never know how those influences will manifest themselves. Since it's been 3 years now since a new Loudness album, hopefully they have something in the works and we can find out what's next. And that is Loudness. Hope you dug the video and had fun taking a look at an awesome band that frankly I didn't know much about either. Obviously their discography can be daunting. I'll admit it was for me. But if you're unfamiliar with Loudness, you're in for some kick-ass albums. Check out The Birthday Eve from 1981, Devil Soldier from 1982, The Law of Devil's Land from 1983, Disillusion from 1984, Thunder in the East from 1985, Lightning Strikes from 1986, Hurricane Eyes from 1987, Soldier of Fortune from 1989, and Loudness from 1992. Where you get back into Loudness after this is kinda up to you. For me, The Sun Will Rise Again from 2014 and Rise to Glory from 2018 are badass, and those would be my recommendations. But there's great stuff on most of their albums. Loudness goes in a lot of different directions, and it really comes down to what you like personally. So let me know what Loudness albums are your favorites, and see you next time. Thanks for watching.